Well, good morning. How are we all today? I'm going to start by getting you all to introduce yourselves. If you can talk me through what your undergrad degree was, what your postgraduate course is that you're studying now, and sort of give me a bit of background about you, about your family life. Are you working while you're studying, etc.?
Alrighty, so my name's Matt. I'm from Southern Cross University. So my undergraduate degree was in sport and exercise science. So I did a 3-year bachelor, and it got me into a master's program of clinical exercise physiology. So it's a bit more refined, a bit more specialised around like that clinical allied health sort of field. My background, I come from like rural sort of New South Wales, down the coast a few hours around Yamba. So for me, down there, health services weren't as sort of accessible for these people. There's a lot of chronic disease sort of in these rural communities. So I wanted to do something there where I could go back into my community and help out. I really love that sort of whole being able to use exercise is one of my passions to sort of act as medicine for people. And I'm like a very holistic sort of approach like that. But yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Matt. Nikki.
Hi everyone, so my name's Nikki and I'm from Bond University. I studied actuarial science as my undergraduate degree, which for those of you who don't know what actuarial science is, it's in the business faculty. And it's kind of an intersection between finance and mathematics. So actuaries usually go into insurance. It's all about analysing the probability of risky events happening and then trying to put a price tag on that. So that was my undergrad, and then from that I went on and did an honours degree, again in actuarial science, which had a big research component to it, so it was kind of a taster into the research life. And then from that, I'm now doing a PhD still at Bond, and it is sort of still in that actuarial science field around sort of more data analytics this time. I love studying, and that kind of constitutes a lot of my life at the moment. So yeah, that's me.
Great. Thanks, Nikki. And last but not least, Amanda.
Hi, I'm Amanda. I'm from Griffith University. My undergraduate is a Bachelor of Public Health in Health Promotion and Public Nutrition. I have just finished my Bachelor of Health Honours, which was a year-long research project, and I start my PhD, like yourself, in October this year. I am a very busy mum of 6, and I also work at Griffith Uni, and I'm a tutor for the University of Sydney as well. So
very busy lady.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for joining me today. Matt, I'm going to start with you. At the end of your master's, you'll be a qualified exercise physiologist. Why did you decide to enrol in a master's?
Well, I will say that I do enjoy the study. I really, at the finishing of my bachelor's, I realised that I wasn't sort of specialising in an area. I had a lot of opportunities to go into different areas, but not really anything that was clinical and moving away from that sort of health and fitness industry into the allied health sector. So I really wanted to sort of expand on that knowledge that I've gained in sort of introductory to exercise physiology and sort of drive that sort of point home with me. The master's program for me, it's just another extra level of learning. So you're going to have sort of that extra expert level qualification, which is just going to help me sort of in employment and things like that, give me more opportunities. So,
since you've done a bachelor's degree, how does studying at a postgraduate level differ to your undergraduate?
It's a big step up. You definitely notice from undergrad to postgrad, so the level of learning and the demand that has increased, but not to sort of a scary degree. More so just more interesting work. I just find that going into a master's program, your sort of motivation behind that is to really refine and specialise in an area of interest. And once you go into a master's, it feels less like a chore and more like just like sort of like a hobby. So studying isn't really tough for me. I just sort of happen to do it as I go. So it's really good.
Would you say it's a much more focused level of study?
Yeah, absolutely. Everything that you do is around what you're looking for, employment-wise. It's all interesting in that field. So yeah, it's really, really fun.
And what opportunities does Southern Cross offer you to ensure you graduate with the best possible outcomes?
Yeah, so as part of my degree, we do a minimum of 360 hours of clinical placement. So in that, we're going out into the field, we're meeting with sort of industry leaders and experts in different sort of sectors of exercise physiology. We're getting those employment opportunities. Like a lot of previous exercise physiology students that have graduated end up with employment in these areas where they're getting that placement opportunity. So being on placement all year round really sort of opens that door up for us in terms of employment following graduation.
Well, with all of those hours of clinical practice, you must certainly have helped a lot of people so far before even graduating.
Yeah, well, so we get to see like a nice broad range. We also have a clinic at the Gold Coast campus where I'm at. There's another one in the Lismore campus too, where basically they get a pool of exercise physiology students in there 1 day a week, and we actually get to consult as a real exercise physiologist, which is really fun. We see a whole range of different conditions. It's just so interesting. We really sort of get free roam and get to practice what we love. So
Great. Nikki, on to you now. You've taken a path to research and are now doing your PhD in business at Bond. A PhD, I can imagine, is a massive undertaking. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you decided to do one?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I kind of have always had potentially doing a PhD on my radar, but I didn't want to rush into it at all and sort of just wanted it to eventuate if it did happen one day. And so for me, that journey sort of looked like doing my undergraduate at Bond, which was, as Matt was saying before, more of a theoretical side of things. You're just there learning the stuff. And then from there, moving on to honours, which was a taste to research, was again like a more refined sort of study. And that allowed me to have a bit more flexibility to branch out to areas that I was particularly interested from my undergraduate degree. And once I finished honours, I actually then started working down in Sydney with KPMG and their risk consulting firm. And I was working part-time during my honours degree with them as well, and then started full-time down in Sydney. And while I was down in Sydney, there was a few things that came up in the way that we were doing our work, and I thought there was a really big opportunity to improve a particular aspect. And so I had some conversations with my team down in Sydney, and then also with some of my lecturers back at Bond who I'd kept in contact with, just about different ways we could potentially be doing things. And out of that has come this sort of idea for a PhD project. So then had discussions with both sides, and we've ultimately, Bond has partnered with KPMG, and we're doing this big research project, which happens to be my PhD. So that's sort of how I've gone along the PhD journey, and it's really exciting for me because my PhD is directly linked with industry. So it's not just doing the academic side of things and publishing a paper at the end, which gets published in a journal and maybe won't get implemented in practice. It's much more about working with industry to see how they're doing things, how can we improve on that, and it's that whole feedback loop to actually implement the research that we're developing.
Can you talk us through what your PhD is all about and how that's going to benefit your workplace as well?
Yeah, sure thing. So keeping it very sort of layman's term because it can get technical. So my PhD is sort of the intersection between data analytics, or some of you might know like AI, machine learning, and then operational risk management. So in organisations, how are they managing health and safety, equipment faults and failures? In the financial services sector, that might be things like fraud and money laundering. And basically, we're trying to use data analytics tools to predict when those operational risks are arising in organisations so that organisations can have their finger on the pulse more frequently. And it's also more of an objective way of looking at it rather than the really subjective measures that they're currently using. And how that'll be implemented in practice is basically with these data analytics tools, we're trying to develop models, and then hopefully in time that can be developed into some sort of product or solution which organisations can have on site, and then they'll be feeding their data from operational aspects of their business straight into this model, which will then give them sort of like traffic light notifications or different predictions of probabilities of those risks arising, and then they can act to try and mitigate any major losses that might result.
So talk me through how long you've been doing your PhD and how much longer you've got to go before you get that doctor title.
So it definitely is a long journey. So typically PhDs are sort of 3 to 4 years, just depending. That's for a full-time workload, and then if you do it part-time, obviously it's longer than that. I'm aiming to do mine in 3 years, which will mean that hopefully I'll be finished by the end of next year, pending everything going well. So there's a lot of variables in the process, and who knows what can pop up at any time.
Great. Amanda, I'm going to move on to you now. I hear you've been at Griffith University a few times, having enrolled out of school and returned as a mature age student. Can you tell us about your journey and why you decided to return to study?
So I went to Griffith University as a high school leaver, which was all the way back in 1998, before both of you possibly were born. I was 19, wasn't quite ready to settle down, got the travel bug, deferred for a year, and then all of a sudden it had been 10 years and my deferment had expired. I had been living overseas. I came back to Australia. I had finished my family, decided that it was time to go back and do something for myself. I enrolled in my undergraduate degree. I did one subject that then changed my whole trajectory, and I changed my degree. Moved on. I've just finished my year-long honours project and starting my PhD in October, which will be around the social aspects of COVID-19. So obviously public health is very important in the middle of a global pandemic. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
And what are you hoping to achieve with that PhD?
So with my PhD, I will be studying the social aspects, like I said, of COVID-19. So we're all in the same pandemic. Unfortunately, while we're all in the same storm, we're not all in the same boat. So there are a lot of vulnerable communities and populations within Australia and around the world that are suffering at disproportional rates compared to others. And I'm not just talking about those that are infected by COVID-19, but it's the broader impacts, the economic crisis that has arisen from this, housing, mental health obviously having a major impact on that. So I'll be focusing on how we can better support vulnerable communities in pandemics.
And how have you found managing doing your master's, and you're obviously going on to do your PhD with 6 kids and all of that? It must be very busy.
It just takes a little bit of time management and a lot of support. I'm very lucky that I have been mentored by some incredible female academics at Griffith University that have encouraged and inspired me to continue my studies, and also that I've had the opportunity to work at Griffith University while completing my studies as well, which has been very helpful, obviously, with 6 children to feed. So I'm very appreciative to the support that I've received from the university.
Great. And I hear you've had some pretty amazing real world experiences with Griffith, both in Australia and overseas. Can you talk me through that?
Yeah, so I was very lucky to travel to Cambodia, where I conducted a needs assessment in a rural village where the children, there's a very low level of education. For those of you who are not aware, Cambodia went through a massive genocide in the late 1970s, which resulted in almost a quarter of the population dying, sadly. And also anyone who was educated was removed not nicely. So they basically started from ground zero. So now those children that were we're just starting to see educated adults coming into Cambodia now, because the schools were closed, universities were closed. They were removed all the way back to ground zero, basically. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. So we did a needs assessment. We were lucky enough to then be able to implement an intervention in helping adults feed their children better, which obviously is not easy when they have very low income. That was an absolutely life-changing experience for me, and I wish that everybody had the opportunity to travel to places like Southeast Asia or Africa or other places like that to see how lucky we really are. And then on the flip side, I was also able to do 200 hours with the Gold Coast Public Health Primary Health Network, where I worked on the Gold Coast Joint Regional Plan for Mental Health and Alcohol, Suicide Prevention and Substance Abuse. So really had a lot of opportunity to apply everything that I've learned in my degree during those practicum experiences.
Sounds amazing. I'd love to know from each of you, what are your plans once you finish your postgraduate study?
For me, I'm keeping my options open. I have like a particular interest in cardiac rehab and diabetes management. So I look at either going into sort of like a chronic disease program in hospitals or looking in specialising sort of in practices in chronic disease management.
For me, I actually want to keep on the research journey in terms of implementing my research back in industry. So at this stage, probably not going down the academic pathway, which is where a lot of PhD students go down. But I want to go back into industry and try and keep my research going from a practical point of view and implement that.
I probably will be one of those academics that continue on researching and working at the university, teaching and sharing my expertise, but also obviously as soon as borders open, I would also like to be back hands-on at the coalface in hopefully Southeast Asia.
Great. Now, we have a few people here that might be considering postgraduate study. What's your advice for them?
Explore your options. I think, have a look at the different institutions. At the end of the day, they're all meeting the same standard. So really it is up to you to sort of get the little things out of the university that you want, but making sure that it is really something that you want to do, because like I said before, it is a step up and it is a large commitment. So making sure that, you can sort of devote that time and that commitment to your studies. But also just enjoy it. It's really fun. You get to sort of specialise in that area of interest, which is what it's all about.
Definitely echo Matt's comments around making sure that you do really have a passion for that area before you leap into it, because it is a big commitment. Obviously, it ranges from sort of masters and honours, which are generally sort of 1 year. PhD is 3 to 4, as I said, sometimes longer. So you really want to love it and love the project that you're working on. And if you do, if you do love it, it's a really exciting opportunity to really get into the nitty-gritty. And the other thing I would say is, I think one thing that's been talked about throughout this panel was the fact that we've all had some form of industry experience. And so when you go into that postgrad study, it's much more of how is what you've learned on the theoretical side in your undergrad actually implemented in practice and used. So I think don't be afraid once you finish your undergrad to go out and get some industry experience. And then when you start postgrad, if you still are keen to do it, you'll have a much better understanding of where it actually fits into the process of practice.
My advice would be that it's never too late. So if it's been 20 years since you did your undergraduate, it's not too late to do postgraduate. Life is a learning opportunity. It's a lifelong learning. We're learning every day. So don't sell yourself short if it's been a little while since you did that undergraduate degree.
And what's been your favourite part about postgraduate study?
I'd say for me, the practical experience. It's just I've sort of got tastes of it in my undergrad, and then to go into postgrad and just get thrown in the deep end and really have to problem solve and refine my skill set. It's been like I've only been doing it now for this year, and it's just been so much fun. It's been really busy but enjoyable all the same.
For me, it would have to be the tight-knit group of people that I work with. So doing my PhD now, there's probably 6 or 7 PhD students in my sort of sub-area of the faculty, and we're just like a really tight group of people. We're all working on the same journey at different time points towards like a common goal, even though all our topics are slightly different. And it's just really nice having that camaraderie in the PhD room. Yeah, and I would say one thing that it kind of is similar to my experience during my undergrad at Bond, because Bond is sort of a smaller university. I do feel like I had that tight-knit group of people in my undergrad of actuarial science, particularly because it was sort of a smaller cohort as well. But I'd say that's amplified with the PhD.
For me, I'm a qualitative researcher, so I talk to people about their experiences. And so having talked to people about the different experiences that they've had through this pandemic has been really humbling. It's been really eye-opening and it's been really interesting. And just very grateful that there's been so many people that wanted to share their stories with me. So yeah, that's been my favourite part.
And I'd also love to know how you juggle work and your other responsibilities while studying.
Yeah, so during my undergraduate degree, I I spread myself pretty thin, so I was working pretty much full-time hours while studying a full-time load, which I managed to sustain it for a couple of years, but going into my Masters, I decided I needed to back off. So I was actually really lucky at my university to get a sort of a casual position at our university's library. So that's been perfect. I can sort of do my little shifts and then sort of work in my study around there. I don't have to sort of shuffle about. It's been a really sort of smooth transition. But I would say that for those thinking that part-time or full-time work and full-time study is impossible, it's really not. If it's something that you really want to do, so you really want to study this particular course, then you'll find a way to sort of juggle everything else that life throws at you. So it's definitely a possible goal.
I would say for me, the key to juggling everything and not feeling like I'm snowed under has just been communicating with my support group. So my supervisors for my PhD, and the same with my honours program. If I had other commitments, work commitments, social commitments, whatever it was, and I was feeling like I wasn't giving enough time to my studies, I just kind of verbalised that to my supervisors and said, hey, this is going on. And most of the time they were really supportive and helped me get back on track and do what I need to do. So I think it's just a matter of communicating and making sure you do take out time for yourself, because it is a big commitment and it takes it out of you. So making sure that you do balance it with exercise and whatever you enjoy outside of studies, crucial.
For me, it's all about time management, and also for mums who study, it's about knowing that your children are watching and that you are their role models. So that keeps you going. That's very motivating. And also, like yourself, having really supportive supervisors is extremely helpful. And I've been lucky to be supported in work opportunities as well by my university, which has allowed me to work on campus that fits in around my study, which is perfect. So I'm a research assistant and I also teach first and second year undergrad courses. So it's been perfect for me.
If people are deciding where they should do their postgraduate study, obviously, or with 3 different institutions, I'd love to know what you love and why you chose the institution that you're at.
Yeah, so bias aside, I know we're all here on behalf of different universities, but I couldn't sing SCU's praises enough. The level of support service that they offer at the university for all students, from things like assignment help right through to transitioning to online study and navigating that beast in itself, can be really daunting. But Southern Cross, one thing they have done really well is access to support and giving good quality support. So that was a big sort of point for me, that I'm finding it makes that whole study process a lot smoother. A second thing would have to be just the level of expertise that the staff have at Southern Cross. In my degree, specifically, the assessors and the academics that teach us are just absolutely brilliant. And at the end of the day, they're the people that you really want to hear from to get yourself into that best position following study. So yeah, Southern Cross has been awesome for me through my studies.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, Matt. It's about finding what works for you. For me, Bond has been amazing because right from the beginning, before I started my undergraduate, the thing that I loved about Bond was the real community sense. It's a smaller university. It's a tight-knit group of students. It's a tight-knit group of academics, and the academics really get to know you as a person, which has probably what's been keeping me going at Bond and keeping right through the PhD process, because I feel supported the whole time by the people around me. And the other thing for me in terms of my specific degree area of data analytics and actuarial science, Bond is the only university in Queensland that offers the actuarial science program, so that is a kind of tick. But also the level of quality of the academics in my practice area are exceptional. Like, I couldn't ask for better. And the resources that we have also in the data analytics field, we've got a centre for data analytics, really great computing power, and the staff there are just always so willing to help their students. It's really incredible. I
would have to agree with all of the points raised. but from a different university. The only difference is that our university is a large university. However, we have many different schools, and within those schools we have smaller departments, and we do still have those smaller cohorts and the close-knit community feel. We also have a lot of excellent clubs and societies, which gives us a real sense of community as well. Depending on what field you go into, for example, I'm in health. We have state-of-the-art health facilities at Griffith University. We have probably the best anatomy lab in the Southern Hemisphere, which we have access to right from the first year of your undergraduate. All of our lecturers are industry experts. We have a lot of special guest associate professors that work across the road. We have our own hospital. So there's a lot of different reasons why I've chosen Griffith, and also because I've been there since 1998, on and off. I've seen a lot of changes, and they've all been for the better.
Great. Well, we do have time if we have any questions from the audience. No? Well, you can come and visit. Oh, yes? Did you guys hear that? So with student debt, how do you manage? It can be very expensive to study.
Yeah, so as an Australian citizen, we get a thing called HEX Help. So it's a government loan where basically the debt that we accrue over our studies isn't required of us to pay it back maybe as we're studying. It's more so when you earn over a certain amount, you start to pay that back in small amounts. So it's really manageable. It's not sort of, I know, sort of coming into university, it is sort of one of those unanswered questions, and it can be a bit of a concern, but the government's made it really accessible and really easy for students to be able to afford both undergraduate and further study as well.
And I'll just make a side point on that. For Bond, since we're a private university, it differs slightly from the HEX Help that's available for public universities, but it's virtually works in the exact same way. It's just called something different. It's called Fee Help, but yeah, works in the same process. And when you move on to postgrad PhD, there's also opportunities to get funding through the government, through scholarships, and your university can help you through the application process for that.
So I'll just add on that those scholarships for PhDs do come with a weekly stipend and are paid over 3 years. So that helps you to manage your responsibilities of having to work and study. So that's a really big help. So those scholarships are definitely something to look into.
Do we have any further questions? No problem. If you want to chat to these guys one-on-one, they're going to be at their separate exhibitors booth. So please pop over and say hello, and you can chat to them if you've got any further questions. Thank you all so much for joining me on stage today.
Thank you.